On this episode of AV Week, Microsoft is getting more and more into the education market, Halo projects, and the NHL. Also talking about how you best handle firmware updates. All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 297, recorded Friday, May 5th, 2017. AV on Ice. Support for AV Week is brought to you by Infocom International. Infocom 2017. What will you create? Join them June 14th to the 16th in Orlando, Florida. Visit infocomshow.org for more information. And by Atlas IED. Innovative audio solutions for every business environment. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to talk about that very thing, first and foremost, one of the hosts of the fabulous AV Social and also works for Net AV. Her name is Dawn Mead. Hello, ma'am.
Hello. How you doing?
Doing good. And also, if you go to our website, AVNation.tv, there's a brand spanking new one, new AV Social talking about free beer. That's all I'm going to say about that one. So, also with us is a newbie, so be nice to him, Dawn. His name is Aaron Reigard. He is from West Penn. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, but nobody told me about free beer before we started. I feel like that's an important piece of information.
You know, it is.
Podcast.
Yeah, see, there you go. This is why she's a marketing person, and I'm, I don't know what the heck I am anymore. All right, let's kick this off here, guys. Let's talk about Microsoft for a second, and not for nothing. Let's go to an expert on coverage and news and stuff like that. This is Donald Trump's favorite newspaper, the New York Times. Microsoft is looking to regain lost ground in the classroom, quote unquote. The story is actually talking about Microsoft's aim at the technology inside the classroom. For years and years and years, one of Microsoft's main tenets in one of their goals was to have a PC in every home, a PC at every desk, and for them to run Microsoft Windows. They got that, but also they started losing some market share to Apple and to the Macintosh, or to the Macs. Now they're taking a different approach, and they're going after the technology in the classroom, obviously, with the Surface Hub. Dawn, I want to start with you on this. As an integrator and somebody who has a long-standing relationship with other manufacturers that Microsoft is going after, how do you manage that, right? Microsoft, and the reason I'm asking it this way is Microsoft is a big behemoth. They have billions and billions of dollars. There are maybe 2 or 3 manufacturing companies in the AV space. Samsung is one of them that has the pockets that Microsoft does. So they come to Net AV and they say, here's some free crap and here's some stuff and here's a great spiff and this, that, and the other. How do you manage somebody brand new coming into this space who, granted, has a lot of resources, but you also have existing long-term relationships with their competitors?
Well, I mean, it's asking that question. It's the same as with any set of manufacturers. If you sell AMX and Crestron, if you sell West Penn wire and, somebody else's wire, every single manufacturer out there has other competitors, and integrators, especially small ones that have to compete against the bigger guys, have to have the flexibility to use other manufacturers. So, what I would tell Microsoft is, well, first of all, Microsoft wouldn't come to an integrator like us. I mean, this is more of the fallout from the past tense convergence of AV and IT. And I have a fear hearing this, that, my own company doesn't do schools very much. We do a little bit of higher ed, but not to the extent that some integrators do. But if you're an integrator that's working in schools, I would be afraid right now, because even in the corporate and government space, we see since Cisco bought Tandberg, 9 times out of 10, even though we are Cisco select dealers and we're selling Cisco projects, we have nothing to do with the Cisco product that's bought. Wow. The IT departments in the companies and government agencies will procure the Cisco product under their contracts, and then the integrator comes in and is told, here's the Cisco things, here are the video conferencing things, do your stuff around it. So if you're an integrator working exclusively in the education space, I would try to figure out how to work with Microsoft really quickly, because I think it's going to become the IT departments in schools going out and purchasing these items instead of putting it out as an AV bid. And then your AV bid's going to just be some Caliphone headphones and some Epson speaker or projectors with their free lamp program or whatever it is that they have for schools. It's not going to be your wheelhouse anymore if you don't take steps to prevent that. But as for juggling multiple manufacturers, I mean, it's just part of the game as an integrator. If you're an integrator and you only carry one control company and one projector company and one screen company and one wire company, you're not going to be in business very long because you will be outright shut out of a lot of bids when they say, well, the University of Maryland is a Crestron campus and you only sell AMX. You might as well not even show up at the pre-bid. You're not going to convince them to change their mind. And it's going to be the same if RFPs start coming out that say, we want the Microsoft Hub versus we want, the Promethean boards
InFocus or Epson's Interactive or whatever.
Any of those things. There are a ton of competitors out there. I think we talked a couple weeks ago about Google possibly coming into the market with a similar product. And pretty soon, all these big guys are going to try to fight each other. If you're a little integrator and aren't willing to play with them, you're just not going to get the work. So keep that in mind.
Aaron, from the manufacturer standpoint, Microsoft is entering not necessarily a new space because they was it 4 years ago now, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, they had a space at Infocom. They didn't use the space.
They had white leather couches at Infocom.
Yeah, they had leather couches, and they had the World Cup, so that was nice. But that was kind of their first trying to get it, and then by the time ISE came around, they were showing the hub. So the AV space is not new to them, but this specific vertical is new for them to kind of get back into. When it comes to as a manufacturer, somebody coming into your space, right, that is not necessarily traditionally in your space, but suddenly you have a new player, you have a new opponent. How do you handle that?
Yeah, so I think you got to look at it in a couple of different ways. You've got a choice. You can either kind of settle back in and be incredibly defensive and just try to wall yourself off. But in most cases, I think you've almost got to be offensive in the way you go out and you utilize your lead into that market and into that vertical, and really then, especially in these types of cases, focus then on your existing account base, on the integrators, on what you already know that's taking place, and help to work to insulate that. And why we don't ever take a negative approach, but you're instilling some seeds of doubt, right? So if we talked about the Microsoft example specifically, you hit on it, that 4 years ago they had the product of the year at Infocom, the white couches in the World Cup. But it wasn't bad. And if Don would have brought free beer, I'd still be there. Yeah. But in this case, there's plenty of opportunity for some of these competitors to start kind of working their way through and making sure that they are so firmly entrenched, it's difficult for them to be extracted. You've got to make sure that you're really insulating yourself in and you're offensive and you're bringing in incremental and new value. Because the reality is we're going to get more of this disruption, right? You've got to be prepared for how to deal with it. If we're talking about wire and cable, or if we're talking about Chromebooks, these new players are going to keep dropping themselves into the middle of markets if they think there's an opportunity. And in this case, it's really Microsoft responding to their losses from the last 25 plus years, right? So it's going to be interesting to see this one specifically play out. But my thought, if it's my call to make, I'm going to take the offensive against them as opposed to just waiting back.
All right. Speaking of offense, let's talk a little bit about hockey for a second. Not for nothing, we're recording this on Friday, May 5th. So happy Cinco de Mayo. But as of this moment, my St. Louis Blues are technically still in the playoffs. By the time you listen to this come next Monday, they very well may be out of it. So I say this, with a heavy heart, and for any Capitals fans, I apologize that I have two Pittsburgh Penguin fans on this podcast. So,
I'm sorry, Tim. I was just glancing at all the Stanley Cups we have. I didn't catch that last part.
And I'm sorry, but we have to go. If you're watching the video, we're going to go to Dawn for a second as she sports her Pittsburgh Penguin gear. Okay. That's nice. I hope we face you in the playoffs. I'm just going to say that. I hope
Love
we
you,
make
Jim.
it that far. All right, so let's talk about this for a second. SCN did a very nice piece on the 8 best projection mapping on the ice. And number 8 is the Pittsburgh Penguins, goes all the way down to number 1, who I would actually disagree with Matt on this. He put the San Jose Sharks Shark Tank as number 1. I would actually disagree with that and say the Toronto Maple Leafs is number 1. But we'll put a link to the story. Click on it, and you can see the video of each one. Aaron, with when it comes to getting involved with installations like this, this week the St. Louis Blues president laid out a roadmap for the St. Louis Blues arena, which is called the Savvis Center, to have a renovation. There is very good markers that this very sort of thing is going to happen in St. Louis, which I'm very excited about. I know a couple of guys that are up for it. How do you get in this early? Like I said, the St. Louis Blues guys say this week that they're going to start doing this over the summer once the Blues are out of the playoffs. Hopefully that's not for a while, but that's beside the point. How do you get in, to jobs like this and be able to market yourself saying, hey, we're West Penn and we've done this and this and this. So you should have us do your thing as well. So
that's exactly right. These are those halo types of projects that you're really talking about, right? That everybody wants to hang their hat on kind of as it goes forward. And you would even argue that in the case of St. Louis, from our vantage point, this isn't even early, right? We're kind of looking at those types of projects as much as a year or 18 months out to go in and start having the discussion around what's this ultimately going to turn into? Because if you think about where we're coming in, we're more on the brick and mortar side. So like all of the cabling and things specifically would have to be run and put in. And then we start working with all of the integrators that are potentially going to be participating in the project as early as possible and making sure we get in there. And then aligning with other manufacturers kind of as appropriate. Are they going to have any unique or special needs that we want to make sure that are tying out? And I would say it's going to be the case for most folks on the manufacturing side. And in these halo projects, and it really all comes down to failure proof, right? You can't be in the middle of, you can't be heading into, the opening. You're not going to drop the puck at the beginning of the first there and go through the entire display prior to that. If it gets sideways, that's a terrible fan experience. And then you're going to be on SportsCenter for all of the bad reasons, right? You've got to nail this. So this is the failure-proof kind of project that you really got to get in front of early, make sure you get it dialed in, and then work with all of the decision makers the whole way through.
Don, Aaron mentioned the fact that these are halo projects. You and I both know folks, and Aaron probably does too, that have been a part of certain halo projects they can't talk about for various reasons. Aaron mentioned SportsCenter. Well, that's great as long as it's for a great reason and you can use that video in your next client presentation, right? So how do you manage both the ones you can hang your hat on and use them as marketing, right? And the ones that you can't? You can make veiled references to, but you can't go out and say, I've worked with, X company or we installed the speaker system at this facility.
Well, it's challenging. It's definitely challenging. Fortunately, most of the projects that my companies, the one I'm with currently and previous companies have been involved with, we've been allowed to talk about them after the fact. And so you can point to it afterwards and say, hey, I did that work. Isn't that fantastic? Or you can mention it as an award submission. Our tiny little integrator did the Maryland Emergency Management Agency in 2015. It was our biggest project of that year. It was our biggest single project to date.
Wow.
And when you're a little company taking on a big bite like that, it takes a lot of effort to get it done. But once you get it done, man, that can be a ticket to greater things. And you darn tootin' I submitted that to Commercial Integrator. and we were fortunate to win Best Government Installation of the Year for that project. And it's not something that we do on our own. I mean, obviously when you're doing a major thing like a sports stadium, like a statewide government facility, like a theme park that may remain nameless, because of NDA reasons, those sorts of projects, you want to be able to brag about the technology you've used. You also want to be able to let people know, especially for smaller companies, that you're capable of handling something that large, that complex, and that intense, frankly. So it is a balancing act. Do
you have to get do you find you have to get creative then on those where you've got an NDA in place? So they don't want you to just come out and overtly say where you were. You've got to almost find those kind of other ways around it. You'll see companies that can't use the phrase Super Bowl in the consumer space. They'll be talking about, the year-end football championship. Well,
right.
We know what that is.
And that's exactly the kinds of things you have to do. We have had some government projects in the past that if you look at some of our marketing materials, they say work for a large military agency. And you see a very glorious boardroom picture that has a lot of flags. Right. Of varying services, but they don't tell you what it is or where it is or how it is, those sorts of things. Tim and I both know a fellow that works for a very large manufacturer who does a lot of work at several theme parks in the Orlando area and worldwide.
Yeah.
You can't really get more, detailed than that.
But there are several theme parks in Orlando. I'm just going to point that out there.
Exactly.
There's a water one that,
with some fish.
Yeah.
Black and otherwise. Yes. Mm-hmm. Not to bring in the political videos about those theme parks, but it's a challenge to the marketing person to try to find that out. But when you can get the recognition for a project like this, and this article, with that Matt put together with these projections on the ice, it's amazing the things that we're able to do. These are the kind of things that get me as a person in the industry excited about what we do. And these are the sorts of jobs that even if I'm not the company that did this stadium or that stadium or that castle or that other castle, both of which are in Orlando in different parks, even if I'm not the company that has anything to do with that, when I'm talking to people and explaining that I work in Pro AV and they look at me blankly, I can say, how they projection map on different castles and different theme parks, or how they show on the ice, the lasers and the lights and the pictures. That's the kind of thing that we do in a government space, in a commercial space, in a boardroom. So I think in that regard, it's a great banner for the industry. Even if the individual companies can't use it, all the rest of us can use it as an example of, look at the cool things we can do. Let me tell you how our company can do similar things for you and help you get that kind of buzz for your customers when they come into your facility and see this amazing lobby with an art installation that's video.
Yeah, you can't necessarily say that you did the St. Louis Blues ice, but you can say, you know what, I can do that though, right? All right,
that's the cool part.
Yeah, last question here, and just because you're both Pittsburgh Penguins fans, I'm going to regret asking this. But Dawn, of the 8 that Matt laid out, which is your favorite?
The favorite in my heart, of course, is number 8.
Not your heart, in your AV head.
Hold on, let me finish. My favorite in my heart is number 8, Pittsburgh. I will say, of the 8 videos included in this story, it is the only one that used laser projection as well as video projection. In fact, it was a little short on the video end. But after watching it, I went and Googled, he used something from last season. I went and Googled the 2016-17 playoff edition on YouTube. And this year's includes all 4 of our cups being projected on the screen. And it includes a lot of other features, including some video. So console energy is apparently improving each year as they go. So in my heart, that's my favorite. But I got to say, I can't pick just one. I think all of the Canadian stadiums that are in the article have phenomenal graphics. I don't know who they're using for content up there, but you do know, because I want to know, because it's amazing. The Flames, theirs was hot, no pun intended, or pun kind of intended. The Maple Leafs, who else was in there?
The Canadians.
Yeah, the Canadians. Like every Canadian team that was on that list, and there were several, seemed to have the most innovative use of content and projection, and the mix of live video and the 3D animation on some of them is just ridiculous.
But I think a lot of that has to do with the Canadian team stopped making the playoffs, so they have a much longer off season to actually put that content together. So you
That's
get
Aaron
the creative
Ryard
juices
from West Penn National West Penn Wire.
Well, and the Oilers had to have a good one because all their men are angry because they have to wait in lines so long for the gentleman's room. And,
Yes.
that was the news story this week. Problems at their arena.
All right, Aaron, for your standpoint, what is your favorite video for the ice?
So certainly having an emotional attachment to number 8, and I just assumed he had numbered them in reverse, that he was starting with the first one and then working his way down. But assuming that wasn't the case, I really liked the Canadians. So I thought Montreal just did a really cool job of tying it all together. I thought it was extremely well done and felt like it would have been engaging, calling upon some of the history that they have up there. Yeah. So I thought it was a really cool effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I will say this, Tim, I know you said you weren't sure why San Jose was number 1. I have like one word for you, Metallica. Because honestly, had we not been facing them in the playoffs last year, I would have grooved on that more than anything else. Like they actually appeared in the arena with all the projection and played live for the finals. It was like, are you kidding me? Go Sharks. No, wait, they're playing my Penguins. Go Penguins. So,
they didn't play very well last year. I'll just put it that way. And they're playing golf now. All right. Last story here. I'm pretty sure we're going to hit the last story here. Our buddies, actually, speaking of Canada, our buddies up in Canada, AVWeek, are updating their Blue River NT2000 chipset. Now, we do not talk about chips very often, but here's the crazy thing, and I'll get into the specifics of this and get into why I'm asking this question. They're cutting off. Okay, so here's the thing. They're cutting 27 milliseconds on their transport. If you're not familiar with what Blue River is, it's a company called AVNation. That the Blue River is the chip. Currently, their I guess latency is the best way to put this. It stands about 30 milliseconds. They're taking that down to 3 milliseconds. So their transport is 3 milliseconds is the transport for 4K 60 444. The reason I want to bring this up though is the fact that it's not a new chipset. It's a firmware update. Is my understanding. So the people that use the chipset, if they update the firmware, and as you see it come down in your email saying, "Hey, we have a new firmware update," let me know how it works for you. But Dawn, from your standpoint, I want to get to the firmware part though, and the product incremental change part. To me, that's not an incremental change. It's a pretty significant change without changing out the hardware part. But from a technology standpoint and from a dealing with customer standpoint, how do you roll that out, right? How do you say, hey, we have a feature update. It's a cool feature update, but it's a feature update nonetheless. And getting back into your client's space once it's done, and they've been using it for 6 months, or they've been using it for 3 years, to update the firmware, or do you not even worry about the 3-year part? Is there a time frame here where you'll say, yeah, let's go back in and update the firmware?
Well, I can't speak for other integrators, but I know most of our projects end up with a service and maintenance contract.
Yep.
That we have for multiple years for our end users. And part of that is we have quarterly or periodic, depending on the contract, preventive maintenance visits where we'll go in, we'll send our technicians in, they'll check things out, they'll make sure things, if they've moved stuff around, everything's still wired correctly. They'll do whatever necessary firmware upgrades have come out since then. And generally just, it's like taking your kid for a well visit at the doctor. You just go in, check it out, make sure it's all cool, make sure the customers are still happy, give them some new training literature because they lost some of the training literature, or if half their staff turned over, schedule another day to come out, billable or otherwise, depending on their contract, for additional training. And, they're taken care of under that realm. The places where it concerns me are, of course, with government installations, you can't always bring in thumb drives. You can't always come in and connect to the internet to update firmware. And so in those cases, how do you go about it? Well, you can give them, explain the situation to them and their IT department and their security department, and let them make the decision and make them aware of what the advancements are. But let them know that ultimately it's on you. If it's not going to work optimally for the general or whomever, then, we're letting you know it's available. We can make sure that you get the firmware, but it's your call,
In When I read that, I thought my first thought was actually service contracts. It felt like a commercial for them.
Wow.
As in, hey, you may not want to go through this, but keep in mind, there are these iterative approaches. You're essentially going to be getting, in this case, you could argue it's not a new product, but kind of the point of the article, it's a 10x improvement. That's a new thing. Like
that's a new thing.
Yeah, that's not the same experience you were getting before. So it's almost an enticement that you're going to want to keep taking advantage of these types of things, and we can include it in a very economical sort of way. I hadn't thought about it from the government standpoint, though. That's going to be interesting because this is only going to be more prevalent, right? I mean, your TV gets a firmware update. Yeah,
Exactly.
all these sorts of things. It's got to swing by I got to swing by my Outlaws every couple of months and plug a thumb drive into their TV to make sure it still works.
Well, and the thing is, this is the tricky part, talking to manufacturers, but sometimes those firmware updates may make a specific product work better, but may cause other problems that cascade in the system. So it becomes a balancing act of, is this a firmware update that is mission critical? Is it a firmware update that must happen? The classic story, one of my former coworkers went to work for a government agency that was headquartered next to the Pentagon or in the Pentagon. I can't remember exactly. And they had a VTC system that needed a firmware update. And this particular, it might have been Polycom, could have been Tamberg, but this particular VTC firmware upgrade made the system non-functional until it was upgraded. So he had to go into probably one of the most secure places in the United States. Can't bring a thumb drive in, can't bring a laptop in, can't connect to the internet. And tell them, well, then you need to figure out how we're going to get a firmware upgrade onto your machine, or else your general that's going to be in there in about an hour for his meeting with people in an active theater won't be able to use it. And he basically left the choice up to them. But those sorts of situations aren't rare when you're working in the federal sector.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
So it's good and it's bad. It has its challenges.
Well, it does. And it's something that I made the comment the other day. We were recording our IT AV show, and I was talking with Bradford Ben, who is our webmaster, but also works for a small little company called Harman, right? And it's something I've been beating on the drum for about a year, and that's for security patches, right? Stop calling them firmware updates; they're not firmware updates. And Bradford made a good point. He said, sometimes a security patch is a firmware update, right? It's true. Changing functionality, changing feature sets is a firmware update, and if you're securing or re-securing something, that can be seen as a firmware update. But whether it's the government or it's MasterCard or it's Target or somebody that deals in HIPAA laws or student records, these folks have security protocols to validate and make sure that what you're putting on their system is not some malicious piece of software. Right. So making sure that you work within those confines and say, okay, guys, here it is. Here's the update. Once you've passed it, let me know, and we can move forward. So, all right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Miss Dawn Mead, thank you so much as always.
My pleasure. Pleasure to be here.
How do people find you or NetAV?
Well, you can find NetAV at www.net-av.com. You can find me all over the interwebs, most places, as AV Dawn, on Twitter at AV Dawn. You can find me at AVNation.tv. I host these AV social podcasts, the most recent one talking about where you can get free beer at Infocom. So go see that. And shameless plug, if you want to find me at Infocom, I will be running around with the AVNation guys for a good chunk of the time. Or you can schedule to see me by signing up for the Hearing What Isn't Said communication class that I'm co-teaching with Mr. AV Dawn, Harry Mead, on, I believe it's Wednesday or Thursday at 1 p.m. You can look that up in the Infocom guidebook, but we're teaching a class. We hope to see you there.
All right, very good. Yeah, it's always fun. And Harry and Don have done a couple for the last couple of years. You did talk last year about working together, which was really cool.
Yeah, it was actually the precursor to the class we're teaching this year. Okay. We had submitted the class last year. It was an unknown quantity. We together, I had taught for Infocom before, but Harry and I together was sort of an unknown quantity. And we gave a 10-minute, 15-minute version of this talk on working together and communicating better at the Infocom booth during their little series of talks they had last year. And it was well received enough that they signed us up this year. So
does that mean there's a lot of people that are actually married and working together on the out in the industry? Is that what we read into that one?
There are quite a few.
Yeah.
We actually do have quite
I
a
met
few.
my wife at a job, so I can't judge. So.
But this class is more about communication styles and being able to communicate between customers and in your company, or different silos and divisions within your company. Marketing versus engineering speak different languages. Different generations in a company to speak differently. Men and women speak differently and communicate differently. So sort of figuring out all these pieces, putting them together, and lessening the impact of communication issues.
Yeah.
That
All right,
sounds
Aaron.
fantastic.
Thank you so much, sir. How do people find you and West Penn? And also, don't forget find you at Infocom as well.
So I personally at Infocom will be wherever Don tells me the free beer is, but West Penn will be at booth 3755.
Okay.
So we will be there in full effect, so to speak. Basically, have our whole sales team there. Please stop by. You can find us online at westpennwire.com. They actually just stood up a new website a couple of months ago. Dramatic improvement over what we had before. So that was a pretty big undertaking. You can find me on Twitter at Aaron Reichard, AARNREIGHARD, and LinkedIn at the same. So thanks for having me. It was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. My name is Tim Albright. At this point in the season, you can find me on Twitter, but don't follow me. Go by the website. It must be the season. We rolled up a new website as well. Our buddies over at Commercial Integrator did a new site. But our brand new site, lots of people did a lot of hard work. I was not one of them. I just answered questions, but they put a lot of hard work into that stuff. Check that out if you would, please. AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv, you'll find Dawn's show. I mentioned our new ITAV show. All sorts of stuff. We have 2 weeklies. One is called AVWeek, which you're listening to now. The other one is Resi Week, which is the residential version of this. So check all that out. And if you would, please check out our underwriters. They're the folks that make possible what we do. And we've also already started our Infocom section. So press releases and other stuff is there as well. So all that is at avnation.tv. avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. This has been AV Week.